Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Hamilton Buddhist Temple online service. Today is our Obon and July-August Shotsuki Memorial Service. We are very pleased to have Jeff Wilson Sensei from the Toronto Buddhist Church presiding. My name is Frances Campbell. I am your Master of Ceremonies. We will be listening to a special pre-recorded chanting of Sambujo and Sambutsuge today. If you have a Butsudan at home, please feel free to offer incense while listening to the chant. We previously emailed the service program with the Shotsuki names. If you don't have it, please email treasurer@hamiltonbuddhisttemple.ca and we'll send you a copy right away. Please join us in silent meditation.
I'm going to begin the meditation with the ringing of the bell, and I'm going to end the meditation with the ringing of the bell. Please close your eyes and steady your body. Please put your hands together in Gasho and repeat after me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, Namanda, Namanda. We will now read the Shin Buddhist life principles. You can read along with me. Entrusting in the vow of the Buddha, calling the Buddha's name, I will pass through the journey of life with strength and joy, revering the light of the Buddha, reflecting upon my imperfect self. I will strive to live a life of gratitude. Following the teachings of the Buddha, discerning the right path, I will share the true Dharma with all. Rejoicing in the compassion of the Buddha, respecting and aiding all sentient beings, I will work towards the welfare of society and the world. Put your hands together in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you.
We will now listen to a special recording with Aoki Socho, Hirano Sensei, Gubenko Sensei, Ikuta Sensei, and Ouchi Sensei. This was done to assist temples who were having virtual Obon services. Ikuta Sensei and his daughter Erin coordinated and put together this video. They will be chanting Sambujo, followed by Sambutsuge. Please join in the chanting. As mentioned earlier, please feel free to offer incense during the chant.
Namanda, 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 Namanda. Sang
か如来にうのう上う三下無常ジポウ如来にうのう上う三On this occasion of 2021 Obon, Hatsubon means first observance of Obon service, and some temples are observing Shotsuki memorial service. We have gathered here to express our gratitude to all things and beings which make our lives possible. In our recognition of the interdependency and impermanence of all life, we are made to see the preciousness and righteousness of everyone. In this moment of Obon service, we express our love, respect, and gratitude. We are endeavor to listen to their voiceless voice, urging us to entrust ourselves in the primal vow. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I go to the Sangha for guidance. Kogen gi
Buddha
そ真の大戦感がさぶ大小法可動生じ見不下な不正上位会に生じ行ぜ三昧知恵以上公正特別無行志願一切空空一切大安決しうぶ百千の熊無量大小修行語者供養一切死と勝負無量無量天正不略異名語者勝負世界無不影無修仙の五名師匠変師匠国行ぜ精進一難量量がさぶ国の第一公衆奇妙道場超絶国行内音二無道祖加藤愛民道断一切実法来生心熱少女伊藤が国永楽安穏好物神妙霊が神聖本願の日力少所欲実法生存知恵無下上領子孫知が神妙霊領神死食六中華行精進人十系ナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブがんにしくどく平等性一切道具本の大心往生安楽ナワンダナワンダナワンダナワンダナワンダ
At this time, I would like to introduce Jeff Wilson Sensei for his Dharma talk.
Thank you very much. So I'm glad we're all able to be here virtually together this morning. It was sort of funny the way we started off. You know, I live in Waterloo, and when I come down to do the services in Hamilton, it's about an hour or so away. And so I'm always driving in, and often, you know, Marlene or somebody else is the MC, and they're getting nervous because it's getting closer to 11 and I'm not there yet. but every time for years, I've always made it on time, gotten in there, got my robes on, and we've been able to start at 11 o'clock. Never have we failed with that. But then today, there's no driving on the highway. There's no getting everybody together. It's all just from the comfort of our living rooms or wherever. So finally now here I was 2 minutes late. So that's how it goes. Sorry about all that. We just had a little bit of technical difficulty there. But luckily everybody's experienced here with Francis and Marlene and Ray and everybody involved in delivering the service. And so no real harm done in the end there. Thank you everybody for your patience there. I was even getting calls on my phone, but for some reason my phone, it said it was one of my coworkers, so I didn't take it. I'm like, why is she calling me on Sunday? I'm getting ready for service, but it's probably Marlene or somebody, and the phone just gave me the wrong name. But here we are, and I'm glad that we are able to gather in this fashion at least. It was really cool to hear that group chant that we just had, right? We had ministers from across Canada delivering that chant. That's really sort of a rare opportunity for us. Usually we have at best one minister, and unfortunately for Hamilton, it's often me. And I'm certainly not the strongest chanter that Canada has ever produced in a minister. So to hear all of those people chanting so well and in such great harmony, such a group there, that was really sort of amazing. I really appreciate the effort that went into producing that video, because those 5 ministers, they were not together. They were in 5 different locations around Canada, and they did it separately. They didn't record it all at the same time. They had to record it 5 times in their own places, and then somebody had to mix it together to produce that. I was amazed at how well they did it. It sounded really good. Again, probably since I wasn't involved, it was all the much better. So that was really something. The sutra which was performed, of course, was the Sambutsuge. And this is a section of the larger Pure Land Sutra. And normally for an Obon service, what we would chant is not the Sambutsuge. We would chant the Amida Kyo, which is the smaller Pure Land Sutra, but in its entirety. However, that is comparatively long, and it's done at a very fast pace, as many of you will be aware. It's very, very fast and hard to keep up with. So it would have been impossible to sync up the audio of all those ministers correctly for a video, just totally technically impossible to do. So therefore, Sambutsuge was definitely a better choice for today's service. However, since we didn't chant the Amida Kyo, which is the traditional sutra for Obon services, I want to at least read a short excerpt from that sutra. So, hold on a second, I'll grab this here. Now, in this excerpt here, in this passage, Shakyamuni Buddha is describing Amida's Pure Land to Shariputra, who's one of Shakyamuni's most advanced disciples. Here's what the sutra says. Shariputra, in that land, there are always many kinds of rare and beautiful birds of various colors, such as swans, peacocks, parrots, myna birds, kalavinkas, and gumiochos. 6 times a day, birds sing with melodious and delicate sounds, which proclaim such teachings as the 5 roots of goodness, the 5 powers, the 7 practices leading to enlightenment, and the noble eightfold path. On hearing them, all the people of that land are mindful of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But, Shariputra, you should not assume that these birds are born as retribution for evil karma. The reason is that none of the 3 evil realms exists in that Buddha land. Shariputra, even the names of the 3 evil realms do not exist there, how much less the realms themselves. These birds are manifested by Amida Buddha so that their singing can proclaim and spread the Dharma. So why do I read this particular excerpt? Well, of course, birds have been on my mind because here it is summertime, and my office, such as it is my dining room here. So I'm always looking right out the window and seeing the birds at my bird feeder and so on. So birds are certainly a common sort of thing at this time of year. But birds also are highly symbolic in Buddhism. And there's 6 types of birds, 6 species that are named as living in the Pure Land in this passage, which I just read. The last of those is the gumiocho. You might have heard Reverend Oichi give a talk about the gumiocho bird. He gave a recent Dharma talk on this at Toronto, and some of you may have listened into that. Gumiocho is an interesting bird because it has 2 heads. So it's a 2-headed bird. And as he explained in his Dharma talk, one time the 2 heads argued with each other, and one head decided to get even with the other head by eating some poisonous food, right? So of course that means they both died, because although there's 2 heads, they share a single body. So it's an illustration of the Buddhist principle that we're all connected, and that what hurts one person also hurts ourselves, that everything is connected in this way. Now, another bird which is mentioned in that passage I just read from the Midakyo is the peacock. And that probably wouldn't surprise us, because peacocks are widely held to be one of the most beautiful birds, right? But there's a further significance for the peacock in Pure Land Buddhism. And this shouldn't be surprising, because everything in Buddhism always has some sort of deeper meaning. Everything on the altar, every image that we see, always there's many meanings to every component of it. So what's going on with peacocks? Well, they're not only birds of the Pure Land who are specifically mentioned in the sutra. It's also said that Amida Buddha rides on a peacock as his personal mount. So he doesn't ride a horse or something like that. He rides on a peacock, according to tradition. Now, we don't actually depict Amida Buddha this way in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, but it's very common in the art of other forms of Buddhism. There's a specific reason why in Jodo Shinshu, we're very strict about Buddha images, and we don't use this one. What we use only is a standing Amida Buddha, who's actually leaning forward slightly. If you ever look at the statue of the temple, if you look at it from the side, if you kind of come up to the front and then look to the side, you'll see it's actually leaning forward a bit. It's not just standing straight upright, but it's leaning in towards the gauging, towards the congregation, right? And there's a real purpose behind this. Sitting Buddhas, whether it's sitting on a lotus or on an animal or whatever, they're relatively passive, right? They're sitting there. But in Jodo Shinshu images, Amida is always standing up. He's always springing into action in order to help others, right? And even leans forward in order to rush in and liberate all of us. So this illustrates how we don't have to go to the seated Buddha Amida and beg for entrance into the Pure Land, like in other forms of Buddhism. Our understanding, which comes from Shinran Shonin, is that Amida Buddha comes to us just as we are, enters into our ordinary, foolish, stressed out lives, and provides comfort and relief from suffering for us. So this is why we have this standing. This is action-oriented Amida Buddha, because it's an action figure Buddha, maybe in some ways. So that's, of course, an important point for our tradition. But like I said, some other Buddhists, they prefer to depict Amida Buddha sitting or riding on a peacock. So why is there such an association with peacocks and Amida and the Pure Land tradition? Well, peacocks are not native birds of North America, so we might not be very familiar with them. Like when I take my kids to the little zoo that we have here in Waterloo Park, we can see a few peacocks in the cage there, but they're domesticated. They're not in their natural habitat. In the wild, in Asia, peacocks are fierce enemies of snakes. They won't allow snakes to live in their territories. And when they encounter a poisonous snake like a cobra, they kill it, and then they swallow it, they eat it. So peacock might look like a little bird, this sort of thing, but they're fierce, right? So this is actually why peacocks are significant to Buddhism, especially the traditions which are associated with Amida Buddha. And as the excerpt that I read from the smaller Pure Land Sutra indicates, the birds of the Pure Land preach the Dharma, and peacocks in particular signify the Buddhist principle of transforming poison into medicine. So just as the gumiocho signifies the Buddhist principle of everything being connected to everything else, the peacock signifies the Buddhist principle of transforming poison into medicine. So what do we mean by this? Well, the peacock, it encounters a deadly snake, but instead of being defeated by the snake, the peacock consumes the snake and it's not affected by its poison. It doesn't die, right? In fact, it uses the snake as nourishment. Its body is strengthened, it's able to grow beautiful feathers and so on. So the incredible plumage of a peacock is a product of the poison that it ingested and transformed through the process of digestion and growth, right? So this is a Buddhist idea because it also illustrates how the Dharma works. The Buddha points out that we suffer, right? And suffering poisons our lives. But by learning how suffering works and immersing ourselves in the Dharma, our suffering becomes the cause of our awakening and liberation. So the poison of suffering is used as the medicine to relieve suffering, right? The Buddha points out the suffering that we have and then uses our awareness of that suffering to help us move beyond suffering towards Buddhahood. A life, of course, provides us with many opportunities to turn poison into medicine, which is to say, to turn bad circumstances into something positive. For example, the pandemic has been a terrible experience for most of us. Many people have died. Many people have gotten sick. We've suffered from job loss, disconnection from our friends and relatives, right? There's been all sorts of difficult disruptions to our normal lives. And the coronavirus has certainly been a poison for us. But at the same time, the pandemic has also presented us with opportunities. In the past, we never would have had the capacity to create an online Dharma service like we're doing right now, right? We never would have been able to enjoy the chanting of ministers from across Canada performing Sambutsuge in unison. You always would have been stuck with me and my pitiful chanting all by myself in Hamilton, right? But instead, we got something which was much grander, much nicer today. This is really only possible because we came together and we were determined to eke some medicine out of the poison of these times that we're living in. The hard times of the pandemic, these were a stimulus for creativity and solidarity. This doesn't mean that the suffering of the pandemic was worth it. That's not what I'm saying, right? The point is that suffering is always going to happen. This is what the Buddha said, this first noble truth. There's always going to be suffering, right? Whether or not there's a pandemic. So when suffering does occur, inevitably, when something poisons our lives, we can try to take it as an opportunity to see if we can produce something good out of the situation. I'll use some examples. My uncle died a little less than 3 months ago. He was my role model for many years. He was a very important part of my family. He was my father's only sibling. And so now my dad is left as the only remaining member of his original family. So I'm sad about the loss of my uncle, who's someone, of course, that I care deeply about. And I'm sad about the impact that it has on my aunt and on my mom and my dad and my cousins and so on, right? So because of the pandemic, in fact, I wasn't able to spend time with him before he died. I hadn't seen him since before the pandemic began. I couldn't travel to see him, right? And he was sick with cancer. He didn't really want to do a lot of Zoom or anything like that. He needed a lot of rest. So people locally could go and visit him, but I wasn't able to really spend time with him. I even had a Zoom meeting set up with him at one point, but then he didn't feel well and we didn't go through with it. So I wasn't able to say goodbye to him. I wasn't able to spend time with him. I wasn't able to attend his funeral, unlike the rest of the family, because they all live in the US, which is where he lived as well. So I wasn't able to say goodbye or even to, sort of comfort my family in any meaningful way because I couldn't be there. But as bad as this was, at the same time, his death was also an opportunity to transform poison into medicine. My uncle was an important scientist, and his death actually brought the scientific community together to celebrate his contributions. They had this big memorial service that they did online, and then they all pledged to see how they might make sure that his work continues. In fact, worked in cell biology on diseases, and so his work has contributed to vaccines, to cancer treatments and things like this. And now there is sort of a renewed vigor amongst the people that he had known to try to make sure that his legacy is carried forward. And I wasn't able to be there myself, right? But the rest of my family did gather together in a way which they hadn't done for years because they're scattered throughout the country. And his funeral became a chance for them to renew family bonds and make plans for future gatherings. And my dad and my aunt, they told stories about my uncle when he was young, stories that many people hadn't actually heard before who were there. So the newer generations learned more about their heritage and about this man who had helped to shape their lives. And this is what Obon time is about. Obon is that annual moment when we turn our attention to all who've gone before us. And the loss of loved ones is always sad. Of course it is, right? But it also becomes an occasion for us to remember their love, for us to strengthen our bonds with those who are still living, and for us to reconnect again with the message of Buddhism. Through Obon observances, we work together to try to transform the poison of loss into the medicine of comfort and insight. I'll give you another example of this Buddhist principle. We probably all noticed how poisonous the online environment is. Hopefully this Zoom service being excluded from that general comment, right? But people routinely, honestly, they treat each other like dirt online. It's very disappointing. They call each other all sorts of names, they harass them, and they do this because they can do it from the safety of their computer or their phone without having to deal with the consequences of hurting someone. So people are much nastier online to each other than they ever would be in person. At least I like to hope they wouldn't be that bad, right? It's really true on social media like Twitter and Facebook and things like this. And it's a especially big problem for women, for people of color, or for people who are concerned about politics and society and things like this. Folks like this get targeted and get harassed. So I started a small scale response to this poisonous online pattern. When I see someone post a comment that attacks somebody for their gender or their race or their sexuality, I always leave a comment myself that supports the original person and affirms their humanity. I use that poisonous comment when I encounter it as a stimulus to always provide a positive reply. In my line of work as a university professor, we're increasingly under attack from right-wing groups that don't want us to teach about the history of race and gender and so on in North America. It's worse in the United States, but we see it here in Canada as well, especially in relationship to teaching the true history of Canadian treatment of Indigenous peoples. There's a lot of harassment of professors who attempt to just get the facts out there. So professors are also getting attacked for teaching about climate change and other scientific matters. There's an entire industry of media which is designed to provoke outrage and then direct it in mass online attacks against historians and scientists. So when I see this happening to a colleague, what I do is I donate money to a charity of their choice, and I petition my other colleagues to do the same. So for instance, last month when a colleague of mine at a university in Florida was getting targeted because she posted some facts about LGBTQ people's sometimes negative experiences with some forms of Buddhism, I sent a request around and several of us donated money and were able to send a transgender child to summer camp. So I actually call this little thing that I do the Peacock Project. What we do is we turn poison into medicine by responding to negativity that we encounter with a positive outcome that we produce. And for me, this is a way to practice the great compassion that Amida Buddha models for us. Transforming poison into medicine, this is the fundamental activity of Amida Buddha. I heard a story from Dr. Mark Uno one time, which illustrates this. Many of you will be familiar with Mark and previously with his father, Taitetsu Uno. So in the story that Mark told me, Mark gets up in the morning, his bones are creaking, he's thinking about all he has to do today. He drags himself over before the Butsudan and he bows. He tries to focus on being grateful like he's supposed to, right? But as he's doing this, his wife calls out from the kitchen, says, Mark, I've got your breakfast for you. And he thinks to himself, can't you shut up? I'm in here trying to be grateful. So, of course, as soon as he has that thought, he wakes up to just how foolish and self-centered all of this is, right? As Mark put it, Amida responds to this by saying, thank you for bringing your foolish self. So what does Mark mean when he says, thank you for bringing your foolish self? Well, when we go to the Butsudan, we usually make offerings, right? We may include foods like rice or fruit or sweets. But although this is part of the ritual, Amida Buddha doesn't actually eat rice, right? According to Mark, Amida Buddha eats our foolishness. So making offerings, trying to fulfill the Buddha's precepts, saying the Nimbutsu, often we do things to try and to be good, and by being good to earn a reward, like birth in the Pure Land. But Amida doesn't care about our goodness, which isn't actually very good, right? Because it's usually at least somewhat self-centered. I want something out of this in some way. As Mark puts it, we don't feed Amida with our goodness, but with our foolishness. He says that Amida's favorite flavor of ice cream is our bono. A bono is our foolish blind passions. This is a Japanese term for it. It's our minds that are full of the three poisons of greed and anger and delusion. So this is what we're actually feeding to Amida Buddha. Amida Buddha exists not to help saints, right? They don't need our help. Amida Buddha exists to help ordinary people to be released from their suffering. If we aren't foolish, ordinary beings, then Amida Buddha has no purpose. So bringing our foolish, ordinary selves to the Butsudan and presenting ourselves just as we actually are to the Buddha, this is what Amida really wants. It's our foolishness which is embraced in Amida's great compassion. And as Mark explained, he said, it's in that embrace of our foolishness that we are transformed. The reason for Amida Buddha's primal vow is to transform us foolish, ordinary beings into pure enlightenment. Our poison becomes the medicine of awakening. Shinran explained this in his Hymns of the Pure Land Masters. This is a quote. It says, through the benefit of the unhindered light of Amida, we realize Shinjin, the trusting heart of vast, majestic virtues. The ice of our blind passions, that bono, the ice of our blind passions necessarily melts, immediately becoming the water of enlightenment. Obstructing karmic evils turn into virtues. It's like the relationship of ice and water. The more the ice, the more the water. The more the obstructions, the more the virtues. This is how Shinran put it. So in other words, the more the foolishness, the greater our awakening. Like poison in the body of a peacock, when we encounter the Pure Land, our foolishness is transformed in the light of Amida Buddha's wisdom to become the cause for our transformation into Buddhahood. Those who've passed away have now transformed into the great wisdom. They return to us in the form of Namo Amida Butsu, which we gratefully receive as we say the Nimbutsu. And they also return to us in the form of memories, stories, hugs from those who are still with us, and as birdsong that expresses the Dharma outside our window. The sadness of loss is transformed at Obon time into the joy of dancing Obon Odori. Although none of us can transform our poisons as truly as Amida Buddha does, hopefully we can take this principle with us and we can try to do what we can to turn bad situations towards some sort of good and to find potential for awakening in moments of suffering and loss. So that's my Dharma message for Obon 2021. Thank you all very much for listening. I appreciate your patience. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Wilson Sensei, for your most enlightening talk. Please join us now, join Marlene now for the reading of the Golden Chain.
I am a link in Amida's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I will keep my link bright and strong. May I be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. May I think pure and beautiful thoughts, say pure and beautiful words, and do pure and beautiful deeds. May every link in Amita's golden chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, Namanda, Namanda. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff Wilson Sensei, for your Dharma talk today. Thanks to everyone for attending today's virtual service. Ray Nakano's virtual mindfulness meditation sessions will resume in September. For more information, please email him at raymondnakano@gmail.com. The next service will be on Sunday, September 12th at 1 p.m. Services will continue to be online. This brings the formal portion of our service today to a close. Please put your hands together in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.